welcome to Media Curious, y'all. Karen Kring here, and today we're welcoming Mary Schmich to the show. Yay! Mary is a columnist for the Chicago Tribune. She's been doing that since 1992, and so I'm glad she found some time to be with us. So hey, Mary, how you handling the pandemic?
Well, one of my favorite words in the pandemic is Corona coaster. You know,
yeah.
I think like most people, it's like, ooh, it's leveled out some.
Yeah.
I will say that this is, as terrible as it sounds, it's a wonderful time to be a journalist.
Why do you say so?
Because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, it's a fascinating story. I hate to reduce the world to story, but that's what I do. That's what we do.
Sure.
And also, I mean, I realized early on in this for myself that it provided me some sense of purpose and control in this moment when people feel that they have had control stripped away from them. When so many people have lost work and the sense of purpose that comes with that. So I've just been grateful to be able to, as well as living through this, to observe it and try to make some sense out of it.
Observe it and have a gig where you can share what you're observing and exert a sense of control.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You are, besides being a journalist, you're a yoga teacher, and you were talking before we got on about doing Zoom via yoga. So how's that going for you?
Well, early on in the pandemic, the yoga studio where I teach, Yoga View, it closed like all yoga studios did. And then for a while, there was no yoga, but very quickly they figured out, A, people wanted yoga, B, if you're going to stay in business, you got to offer some yoga. And the owners, Tom and Quinn, asked me if I wanted to teach Zoom yoga. And I first thought, no, just not. The last thing I want to do is spend more time on my screen, try to convey this, this physical practice without being able to be in a room and touch people and talk to them. But old dogs, new tricks. I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to give this a whirl. And I love it.
Really? Love it. Why do you love it?
First of all, because people who don't live in Chicago can come. So, I've had a guy, Mark from Paris, who's come a few times. Former students who moved away from Chicago come. And it's just, I've had to think about how you create community on the screen, but you can do it.
Yeah.
So I found it a challenge, and I am surprised by how fulfilling it is for me, and the students say so too. So we'll see what happens when people can go back in the studio.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're able to do it online. It's a lot of people, I'm sure, are grateful that you're still around to teach. And it does sound exciting to be reaching people all over the world. So what brought you into, I'll ask more about journalism in a minute, but what took you into yoga?
When I graduated from college, I went to college in California.
Stanford, I think?
I went to grad school.
Okay.
I went to Pomona College in Southern California.
Okay.
And in the 1970s, and yoga was around, not in the way it's around now, but California in the 70s, in its alternative lifestyle stuff going on. So I was vaguely aware of it. And then when I graduated from college, a friend gave me a book, a little pocket paperback called Richard Hittleman's 28-Day Yoga Plan.
Okay.
And I taught myself yoga out of this book, usually around 2 a.m. after I'd been out drinking. And I would come home and I would open my book and I'd go, I'm going to teach myself triangle pose. And something about it stuck. But then I started running and, and yoga just wasn't really available. And I moved around the country. And then when I turned 40, right after I turned 40 on New Year's Day, I sat down in a coffee house, Coffee Chicago on Clark Street. And I started making a list of New Year's resolutions. And from somewhere out of the ether came the words, do yoga.
Wow.
And I wrote it down and I looked at it and I said, well, what does that even mean? There was no yoga in 1990. There was very little yoga in 1994 in Chicago. But I found a studio and I started, and I just went, wow, I don't know what this is, but I'm here for good. And I was. It's the only New Year's resolution I've ever kept.
When did you decide to transition to teaching?
I've been teaching for almost 20 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
For a long time.
Okay.
But, you know, a well-known yoga teacher asked me at a retreat, he said, do you teach? And I said, no. And he said, you should. And I said, no.
No.
And he said, promise me this, if anyone ever asks you to teach, you'll teach. So that was the deal I made with myself. And then the owner of the studio where I went, Moksha, said, do you want to teach? And I went, well, I made that vow, so I guess I will.
Yeah. It's funny how it all just came to you. What, you know, you made some specific decisions, but it just it sort of came to you, and you listened to the voice.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a lot of what life is. It's a lot of what journalism is in some ways, you know.
Mm-hmm. And hey, as long as we're not diving into journalism yet, tell me about your musicianship. I know you play piano and mandolin. Is there anything else I don't know that you play?
I used to play guitar. I can actually see my guitar, my beautiful little Martin guitar from here, but I don't play it anymore. I just stopped playing it.
Ah, okay.
Mostly I play the piano, which is also sitting right here behind me. I do play that every day. I can see my mandolin reprimanding me for not playing it as often as I should.
You definitely listen to voices, yes.
Right.
You at least annually you play at the Old Town School of Folk Music. You do Christmas, a holiday show.
Right. My column colleague Eric Zorn and I, many years ago, wow, 21 years ago, I wrote a column lamenting how people didn't sing Christmas carols anymore. And Eric came up with a challenge. He said, well, I challenge you. Let's put on a show. And I said, no way, no way. I do resist the voices, you know, at first. But then he said, you know, I said, if you can find us some real musicians, you know, you and I are not sitting up there and having a hootenanny. So he recruited some musicians from the Old Town School of Folk Music. And then the thing just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we do 6 shows a year and they all sell out. But this year, we are trying to, it's called Songs of Good Cheer. And we're trying to figure out how to do it on Zoom. You know, how do you do your holiday hootenanny on Zoom?
I hope that goes worldwide as well.
From your lips.
Yeah, I'll help you with that when that comes to, you know, help that go viral and see how many people from how many of the other countries we can get on that. That would be fantastic. How long have you been playing piano? The instrument you've been having a relationship with the longest time.
Yeah, you know, my mother was a real pianist, a fantastic pianist, but then she had 8 children and we didn't have a piano in the house. But she always made me believe in the piano, and I learned, you know, how to play on a cardboard keyboard.
Oh.
How you learned in Georgia in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And then occasionally during my childhood, we would have a crappy old upright piano, and I would take a few lessons here or there. But really, I didn't start playing seriously. Well, in high school, my parents were in a bar, and they met the barroom piano player named Art Fine, who was really, really good. And for maybe 8 months, they paid him, or often didn't pay him, but he came to my house to give me lessons on how to what I consider fake piano. So he taught me how to read the chords, how to take just a melody line,
okay,
and the chords. so that I could play almost anything.
Wow.
And, you know, from that, it's like I evolved. And this was the era of Laura Nyro and Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and all of those singer-songwriters that used piano, not so much James Taylor, but they used the piano. And so I just really got into that, and that opened things up for me.
Let's talk about journalism. What voices came to you about journalism? What made you decide journalism was going to be your thing?
It was a long and strange path. I had always liked to write. For a semester in college, because some friends made me co-edit the little newspaper at my college. I co-edited it, but I had no journalism training, no journalism experience. I didn't know what journalism was.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways that served me well.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, I think it's very tempting for people to get locked into journalistic formulas. But then I went off and I worked in college admissions for 3 years, and I got a fellowship, and I went to France, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And my boyfriend back in California said, you should go to journalism school. I'm always kind of embarrassed to admit that I got into journalism because some guy told me.
A guy.
But he, you know, he came from a professional family, and I did not. You know, my dad was a house painter. I really didn't know how to visualize my life in a practical way.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. He understood. Well, if you want, you know, you should become a journalist. You would be a good journalist. And I said, I don't read newspapers. It doesn't matter. You would be a good journalist. And the way you do that is you would go to journalism school. So while I was living in France, he sent me applications to 3 journalism schools. I filled them out, not intending to go, mostly to appease him. And they all let me in, but I hadn't filled out financial aid forms. So 2 of them were 2-year programs. I go, I'm not going to journalism school for 2 years. Stanford was a 1-year program. God bless him, while I was still living in France, he drove down to Stanford, and he said, you let my girlfriend in. She doesn't have any money. She really wants to come. And they found money, and I wound up in journalism school.
Ta-da! Thank goodness for friends.
You know? And then right down the street from Stanford was a little paper called the Peninsula Times Tribune.
Oh.
And I still didn't plan on being a journalist. I was going to go live in France. But I walked in right before I went back to France for a few weeks in the summer. England, actually, then. And I put in an application just because it felt like the right thing to do, you know. I got a call while I was out of the country saying, are you ready to come to work? And all of a sudden, there I was.
And then you were a journalist, yes.
Covering Cupertino, Los Altos, and Los Altos Hills in 1980.
Mm-hmm. General assignment?
Yes, right when Silicon Valley was becoming Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Apple was new. You know, they were ripping up the old Yugoslavian orchards to turn them into tech places. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was my introduction to journalism. So it was, of course, thrilling. Even though I didn't know what was going on, honestly. You understand it only in retrospect. Well, yeah, I mean, I really did not understand what was happening. You know, I knew, wow, they're tearing up the old Yugoslavian orchards.
Right. Okay, I see.
And,
right.
You know, I'd go interview the old Yugoslavian farmers who were talking about how they were coming to take their land and they were going to turn it into something.
Right.
You know, something that made computer chips or something.
Right.
It was all totally new.
Yeah. That was an interesting time to be covering that. What, you know, and you didn't know, like you said, in retrospect.
Right. You did not know where that was going. I mean, maybe some people did, but you know, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs were just these young dudes.
Yeah.
Swashbuckling around.
Mm-hmm. How long were you at the did you say Peninsula Times?
Peninsula Times Tribune, yeah.
Yeah, and how long were you there for?
I was there for 2.5 years, and then the editor there went to Orlando to run the Orlando Sentinel.
Ah,
And he started recruiting me to come to Orlando. And I said, why would anyone leave Palo Alto, California to go to Orlando, Florida? I still remember this phone conversation. And he said, how old are you? And I said, 29. I'm sitting on my new love seat sofa that I just bought with my salary. I was so excited to have. I said, 29. He goes, do you want to turn 30 working for the Peninsula Times Tribune? And I said, Dave, I just bought a sofa bed.
that's right.
And memorable words, they became kind of my mantra. He said, fuck the sofa bed. And so that's been my mantra ever since. You know, whenever I'm like afraid,
Right.
I've gotten comfortable, and I just I really don't want to move. I don't want to do the heavy lifting. I just think, fuck the sofa bed.
That's fantastic. So you went to Orlando, which was not far from where you grew up.
Right.
Relatively speaking to California.
Right. Though it was also a different world. Orlando exists, or certainly at the time, it was the dividing line between the South and whatever Florida below it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's marginally Southern, but it wasn't Southern in the way of Savannah, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Except in some ways it was. I mean, it's a mixed bag of a place. And, the exciting thing about Orlando was that you had Cape Canaveral right there, the space program. Disney World had just started in Orlando.
Yeah. I was thinking you're on the cusp of a lot of things just starting up. Yeah.
Yeah. So my first 2 jobs were very much about places that were in the throes of enormous change and development. And when I got to Chicago, which was 2.5 years later, the Tribune called me up one day and asked if I wanted to come work there. They own the Orlando Sentinel, so they.
I was going to ask, they were owners
some of my Orlando stuff, and I'd never lived north. I'd never owned a coat. I had never really lived in a big city.
Wow.
And one of my first impressions of Chicago was, wow, I've lived in all of these places that were going from being small to being big, going, they were under huge and obvious transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And Chicago felt very fixed to me. And it was huge. And of course, what I've learned is that Chicago is never fixed,
True. Mm-hmm.
It's always churning. But it was not, you didn't have that same feeling at the time. It felt like a more stagnant place.
Especially when you get here at first, it seems stagnant, but people who've been here a long time know that Chicago keeps going past you.
Right.
You might be stagnant, but it's going to keep moving.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And learning how to decipher that movement. It's like in Northern California and in Orlando, it was easy to decipher the movement, partly because it wasn't so big. And, these places weren't as established.
Mm-hmm.
The trick in Chicago is, deciphering these changes that are often more subtle.
Yeah. Did you start out as a columnist at the Tribune, or were you a reporter, or both?
Well, I always like to say, I think columnists should still be reporters, and I write a column. It depends on reporting, not always, but I always want to stay anchored in it. But yes, I came here as a feature writer. but with a feature writer with a news orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 2 years. And then they asked me if I wanted to go on the national staff. And that's where I really learned how to do the job. I was just tossed out. I moved to Atlanta. I was tossed out into the world of breaking news, of, being yanked here and there to, whatever was a huge news story going on in the South. And in between times, just roaming around the South looking for stories of change, really, because the South was changing hugely in the 1980s. It was changing racially, it was changing politically. Immigrants were moving in a way that they hadn't before.
Right.
So it was thrilling.
It sounds like what you're saying is when you were in California in the South, you were running around looking for stories, but when you got to your place on the national desk, that subtlety you were able to take advantage of, and the less running around. And am I reading you right?
Well, no. I mean, I ran around. I mean, when I covered the South, I lived in hotels.
Right.
I mean, I went everywhere. I was in New Orleans. I was all over Florida. I was in Arkansas. I ran around all the time, and I had to learn to decipher places and news events really, really quickly, and write on very tough deadlines. Covering major trials from the Jim Baker trial to hurricanes to shooting in Gainesville at the University of Florida. I mean, just bang, 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 and it taught me the trade.
In 2012, you won a Pulitzer. You want to tell us more about that? Do you remember the day that came down, that you heard that? Do you have any memory of that?
Oh, I remember.
Tell us about that.
It's kind of a gray day. I remember that. I was sitting at Starbucks next to the Tribune in the Hotel Intercontinental. And my cell phone rang. And it was my editor, Peter Kendall. And he said, "Mary, it's Peter. Where are you?" And I said, "Starbucks." And he said, "Mary, get back here. You just won the Pulitzer Prize." And I said, "Can I finish my tea?"
I'm kind of busy, right?
So I walked back over to the newsroom, and it was lovely. I mean, people mystify
the
winning of a Pulitzer. And I would be lying to say that it doesn't please me to have been noticed in that way. It does. But it's not as simple a thing, at least not for me, as people somehow imagine. I mean, my first thought at the time was my brother Bill was dying. And I was very burdened by that thought, by that unfairness of the world. It really bothered me. And yet Bill was one of the first people to call me, and it truly made him happy.
Yay.
And that helped me. But it's like people do imagine, oh, you've got this, and it changes everything in your life. And it didn't change the fact that my brother was dying.
Right.
And that troubled me. And then, people started saying to me, even one of my editors said, "Well, I hope you're not one of those people who, once they get a Pulitzer, just can't write anymore."
Thank you.
You know what? Maybe if I were 32 years old, it would have crippled me in terms of work. But I'm 58 years old.
Right.
Or was I 58? 2012.
12 or 9 or 59. I don't know what month you were born.
I was born late in the year, so 58.
Right. Okay.
So I was 58, and the truth was, while it was nice, it wasn't going to change the course of my career. It was not going to significantly adjust my perception of who I am.
Right.
But it's nice. I'm
Nice.
glad not
Did they give you a thing? What did they give you? Did they give you something for your mantle?
There's a little thing about this size.
Uh-huh.
I got it somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah. Something to dust.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't even know where it is, and I'm not saying that faux modesty, right? It's just like, where would you put that?
Yeah, right, yeah. You speak French, yes?
I lived in France twice, for a period of almost 2 years, and my French was pretty good for quite a while, but it's been a while, so.
Do you try to keep it up? Do you do anything to keep it up? Have you been back to France?
Yeah, I've gone to France many times. My brother, Chris, I have 5 brothers, 4 now. Chris lived in France for a long time. And so I would go see him all the time. And that was always a great way to keep speaking and stay in touch. But now he lives in Russia. And I'm not going to Russia, though I did once. But I'm not learning Russian. So my French is dusty.
Yeah. You talked about, did you go there to France initially on a fellowship?
I went the first time on a semester abroad.
Uh-huh.
And
Was that via Rotary?
The second time it was.
Second time, okay.
Yeah.
Because I joined Rotary. I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Evanston. And when I read that you had a Rotary fellowship, I was like, yay, Rotary, has all sorts of tentacles, reaches all sorts of people.
What's so interesting about that is that I used to get these letters from the Rotary Club, international headquarters of Evanston. I had no idea where Evanston was.
Right.
I mean, I was living in California, and then I would get these letters while I was living in France, Evanston. What is Evanston?
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Chicago and went, Evanston.
Oh, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yep. How do you get the ideas for your columns? What inspires those ideas?
Oh, that's one of the great mysteries of life. Panic. One of
Back to the voices.
Self-invented mantras is panic is my muse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first thing I do is I scan the news on any given day. I get up and I just start manically looking at what's happening. And I try to figure out if there is anything that I can responsibly and usefully and quickly say. Those are not the same 3 things.
Yeah, they're not, right.
Right?
Yeah. You can't be quick with some things.
Right. You just can't. And I think it's because I spent long enough as a reporter that I am extremely wary of having big opinions on things that I have not myself reported.
Right.
So, I'll read stories and I'll go, yeah, but what's missing from this?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm always aware that stuff is missing from the picture. And so, that means, I know there are people who would like me to be more blustering and opinionated, but I just feel like I cannot responsibly do that. So when when it's really clear to me and I've got a feeling, I mean, there's certain topics like, through the Me Too movement, certain aspects of what we're dealing with racially, the racial inequities in this country, I feel like I know enough to have a strong opinion. But other things, Jussie Smollett comes along and I'm just thinking, I don't know what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
So before I'm going to have a big opinion one way or the other, I got to wait this out. So anyway, so the news, I look at the news and then I just think about, okay, what am I really thinking about? Really thinking about. Often it's the weather. It's how loud the cicadas are. Mm-hmm. It's how quickly summer's passing. Mm-hmm. It's the challenge of winter. I think about what am I really discussing with my friends? And this is, so, going a couple layers down in your mind. And not every columnist wants to do that.
Yeah. Some don't want to get as deep.
Or they just have a different philosophy about what a column is. And my philosophy has always been, it's kind of the columnist as your friend.
Right.
Your friend who may have had the time to research a topic that you didn't have time to research. So,
someone you can trust to do that.
Right, right. But who also understands that on any given day, you are worrying about your health. You're worrying about the people you love. You're worrying about time passing, So, cover the waterfront.
Yeah, right.
The whole, the full landscape, and that can be complicated. It can be complicated for some people to understand what that genre is.
Yeah. Your family sometimes gets mentioned in your columns. How do they feel about that?
I think they mostly feel okay. I used to be more cavalier about writing about them. Wrote a lot about my mother, never asking her beforehand. I just wrote about her. And I'm pretty sure she liked it. Pretty sure.
Sure.
But I have
she didn't disagree with you. She didn't let you know if she was bothered.
Well, my mother wouldn't, she truly was an amazing person that way. But I have become more careful as time has passed about not appropriating other people's lives and stories.
Yeah.
I don't think I understood when I started, and it's only backfired on me once, but it did backfire on me once.
Okay.
Where, I wrote something about a friend that I thought was amusing.
Yeah.
And she did not think it was amusing.
Oh, ouch.
And after that, I thought, just gotta be careful here,
Something you get asked about a lot, that a column you wrote that gets abbreviated to wear sunscreen, was on one of your days. My understanding is it was inspired by a walk to work.
It was 1997, end of May. I was walking to work, trip to Tribune Tower from my house along Lake Michigan, and I saw a young woman sunbathing. It wasn't even all that warm, May in Chicago. But she was sunbathing, and I just thought, oh my God, I hope she's wearing sunscreen. Because I didn't at that age. And it shows. And it was my third column of the week. I had no idea what I was going to write. But after I had that thought, I kept walking and I thought, well, it's graduation time. I could write a mock graduation speech because I'd reached an age, I think I was 42.
Yeah.
I'd reached an age where I just wanted to deliver advice to young people. I didn't know what advice, but wear sunscreen would be part of it. So I went to Tribune Tower and I sat down. I got some M&Ms, I got a cappuccino, and just spent the afternoon typing up some thoughts.
And the rest is history. It's been recorded by others. It's been misappropriated. It's been, it's had a life of its own since then.
It has. Baz, the movie maker, recorded it, and it became this huge international hit in several languages. It was #1 in England in the summer of 1999.
Yeah. Cool. So how do you feel about that? What's that feel like to have had that specific column have so many legs?
On the average day, I don't have any feeling about that.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes people ask me about it. And when I think about it, when I reflect on it, I just think, isn't that cool? Isn't that wonderful?
Good.
something of the millions, not an exaggeration, I think, millions of words I've spilled out into the universe, that 750 or so of them have had this long life and have meant something to people. But it also feels out of my hands now. It's almost beyond me. It's like, yes, I wrote them. I know exactly what each of those lines means. I know the life I lived to write each of those lines. But it really exists beyond me now.
Yeah.
And that is a great, if mystifying, honor.
Like a good painting where people get to bring themselves to it as well. Right. And interpret it. Did it take you long to write that column, or?
No, course of an afternoon. I mean, I got to work around noon. I was done before 6 because that's when deadline is. And I do remember going home and thinking, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
You finish, I write, 3 times a week I write a column. Sometimes I think, I kind of like that.
Good.
And other times I think, thank God there will be another one.
Yes, it's great until the next deadline comes. So
right.
Yeah. So you're highly accomplished. You used to write for Brenda Starr, the comic strip. You have books out. You've done a lot. Is there anything that is left undone that you still kind of want to do before you hang it up?
Well, I have trouble even seriously approaching the idea of hanging it up.
Yeah.
Though I've reached an age where people are always asking me, so are you going to retire? So what's the deal? Are you taking the next buyout? Are you
yeah, right.
But I just haven't gotten there. I've never been very good at thinking far into the future.
Sure.
Or plotting my life.
And thank God for boyfriends and
exactly.
bosses.
Voices will come to me and say, hey, and sometimes it's a real voice, sometimes it's just a voice in my head.
Right.
You know what you should do now? This. Why don't you do this?
Yeah.
So I am waiting for the voice to tell me what the next thing is. And I haven't heard it yet. And I still find the work I do gratifying.
Writing, a little bit like yoga, is something you can do for a very long time.
Well, yes, writing is. Writing for pay is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, I've been a journalist for 40 years?
Yeah.
That's shocking to say.
And
I know the younger reporters think, what? How old are you?
Right. And how long for the Tribune? Just the Tribune? Right.
And it hasn't all been just for the Tribune, but it's been 35 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. Well, at one place.
Yeah, for 35 years. And I've seen, just these remarkable shifts in the world, in the newspaper industry, and how it's not exactly the change in how we do our work. I mean, reporting is still reporting, right? Thinking still thinking. But certainly the technology has changed. The pressure of the digital age shapes what we do in ways that are hard sometimes to articulate. And the fact that everybody has access to you now, especially if you're a columnist, is a strange thing. So writing a column has always been a public endeavor.
Yeah.
You're out there, your name's out there, your photo's out there, people respond to you personally, and that is wonderful, except when it's awful.
Yeah.
And now, and this isn't brand new, but in the past decade, 12, dozen years or so, the rise of social media coupled with email, everyone has access to you all the time. And everyone has an opinion about you. So living with all of that noise.
Yeah, how does that shape the way you think about what you do?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I do know it affects me. I do know that having all of those voices in your head every day is not a peaceful thing.
What do you do besides yoga to kind of relieve that pressure, or to?
I play the piano. I walk. Gosh, during the pandemic, I'm probably walking 10 miles a day.
Yeah.
And I have deep relationships with people, which helps me.
You've got good friendships. That's huge. It makes a
Very
difference.
fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. Would you, just riffing on that, what do you think of the idea that friendships are being threatened by the pandemic, that the ability to go see people has been threatened?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, in some ways it's intensified certain friendships. I have a couple of friends here who live in the Chicago area, right? So we're in the same time zone.
Right.
But we have our walk and talks.
Yeah.
I talk to them more now than I did before, frankly. Because we're out walking, and it's, Barbara Broughton will text me like just this morning, go, Mary, are you out yet? You want to talk?
You want to talk? Great.
So in some ways, it's I think intensified a certain kind of conversation. But the fact that it is physically isolated so many of us from so many of the people that we love, from friends, family.
Yep.
This is not good, and it is not sustainable.
No, and we're going to need to, it's one of the things we're going to need to figure out how to get beyond, how to adjust to, not adjust to the deprivation, but to adjust to work a little harder to bring people in. So I think.
Right. I mean, it's like people keep saying, well, how much longer do you think we're in this for? And right now, in late August of 2020, I'm saying May of 2021.
Yeah, sure.
That's my hopeful guess.
Yeah.
But I think all of us right now are, you're just finding the door you can crack open just to get some air in, right? So it's different things for different people. It's been interesting to watch, what is the thing that each person needs to do just to stay sane, still trying to be responsible. I went and got a massage the other day.
Yay.
After, vetting Urban Oasis, they're great. The protocols they had in place, you know what, the CDC should go study them. It's like they, these fantastic protocols in place. But I was apprehensive.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, is this irresponsible of me to do this? But that's the little door I needed to crack. Still not going to a bar. I'm not going to a restaurant, even to sit outside. But I respect that there are people who need to crack that door.
Yeah.
What's yours? What door do you crack open?
What's mine? I haven't gotten my hair cut yet, but I've been having people in my garage to make portraits. And so we mask up initially, and then when we're 6 feet away, then we'll unmask, and it's been a great creative outlet. And so has this Media Curious. So thank you for participating.
Your hair looks great. You need to get it done.
Thank you. One of the other things I do is I do deliberate things to call friends, to call them and take a walk if I can. So
Right.
that's what I'm doing.
Right.
But did you get your column done today?
I didn't have a deadline today. I had a deadline yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay, so we're on the relaxation part until it comes due again tomorrow. Will you have one?
Tomorrow, and then again on Friday. But
Yeah.
I had a doctor's appointment, and that was another thing. It's like, am I going to keep this doctor's appointment?
Mm-hmm.
I just decided, yeah, I am.
Well, good. Okay, good for you. Is there anything about journalism or your life or these times that we should be talking about?
You're the interviewer, Karen. I mean,
Well, and that's a good interview. Ask the big question. So I appreciate the conversation, and I've asked what I wanted to ask, but I just want to keep it open for you. If you have something where you have on your mind that you'd like to talk about, or should we just wait to read it in the paper?
whatever it may be. I mean, I don't know who, might be watching this, but one of the things that I really wish more people understood, that even media savvy people do not really understand, is how careful you have to be about what you read and how you read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do tell.
We're all living in this hyperactive, hyper-partisan state right now, this agitated state. I'm agitated too. There are reasons to be agitated, but I'm constantly surprised by a lack of vigilance among people that I think should know better, and imagine they do know better,
Mm-hmm.
about how they read.
Mm-hmm.
So many people are getting so much off social media and not,
Yeah.
they're not waiting for a full story to develop on critical matters.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to more than one source. You just need to read on the things that matter. You don't have to read every update on everything.
Mm-hmm.
But people need to be careful about where they get their news. They need to do some investigation about, what the reliable media organizations are.
Mm-hmm.
If something comes by them on social media, they need to look at it and question, where did this come from?
Right.
I've seen really smart, educated people sharing nonsense
Mm-hmm.
on social media. So,
And it's such a quick thing. Share.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
But without saying, where did this come from?
Right. And why might this have been written?
Right.
Or communicated.
Right.
So.
Well, that's my little lecture.
Okay.
Journalism lecture.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for joining me on Media Curious, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.